All right, let's get right into it. You've seen the headlines, right? The escalating tension between Iran, Israel, and the US. But what if I told you this whole thing is way, way bigger than just a regional fight?
Yeah, that's the thing. What we're watching unfold is actually a part of a massive global chessboard. The ripples from these moves, they spread far beyond the Middle East. And that leads us to the real question we're digging into today.
And it all centers on this. What are Russia and China really doing behind the scenes? Because, they might not be firing the missiles themselves, but believe me, their influence is all over this. To get the full picture, we've got to look at the invisible strings they're pulling. Okay, first up, Russia. Their play here, it's all about strategy. So word on the street from intelligence sources is that Iran has been talking to Moscow a lot. And they're not asking for the usual stuff like tanks or troops. Nope, they're after something way more powerful in today's world: information. And we're not talking about vague promises here. The support they're allegedly getting is super specific. Think high-res satellite feeds, real-time data from the battlefield. It's like giving Iran a God mode view, letting them see exactly what US and Israeli forces are doing, with a kind of accuracy that would be impossible for them to get otherwise. Look, this kind of intel is a total game changer. It's a massive force multiplier. I mean, who cares how many fancy jets you have if your enemy knows exactly where they are 24/7? This kind of help can take a weaker military and pretty much overnight make it incredibly deadly and way more effective. All right, so that's Russia's angle. Now let's pivot to China, because their playbook is, well, it's totally different. Much quieter, much more subtle, but don't you doubt for a second that it's just as strategic. Out in the open, China is playing the diplomat. You hear them calling for peace, for everyone to just calm down. But behind the curtain, it's a completely different story. They're doubling down on their ties with Iran. We're talking oil, trade, and the big one, technology. So what kind of tech are we actually talking about here? Well, experts are pointing to things like satellite systems, advanced navigation tech, maybe even electronic warfare gear. All stuff that could, directly help Iran make its missiles more accurate and its own defenses harder to crack. But wait a second. That brings up a really big question, right? If China is helping out with all this high-tech stuff, why are they being so careful to stay out of the actual fighting? What gives? Well, it really boils down to two things: money and stability. China's top priority above everything else is its economy. A massive war in the Middle East, that would be a disaster for energy supplies and their bottom line. So for them, a small contained conflict where their partner gets a little stronger, fine. But an all-out regional firestorm, absolutely not. That's a line they don't want to cross. Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting, because this is the point where Russia's strategy and China's strategy start to look suspiciously similar. It's a pretty clever diplomatic twist. They're both running the same two-step playbook. Step 1, quietly help Iran behind the scenes. Just enough to make things difficult for the US and its allies. And then Step 2, step out into the spotlight and publicly call for peace, trying to look like the only grown-ups in the room. And you have to admit, from their point of view, it's kind of a brilliant move. They get to push back against US power, grow their own influence in a super important part of the world, and they do it all without ever having to fire a shot or risk getting into a real disastrous fight with the US directly. So where does all this leave us? Well, it means the conflict we think we're watching isn't the real conflict at all. There's so much more going on just beneath the surface. This isn't just about missiles and drones anymore. The next time you see those headlines, just remember that what you're seeing is only one layer of this fight. The real war is a war of shadows. It's a war fought with intelligence, with technology, and it's all about one thing: who gets to call the shots in the new global power balance? Which leaves us with one last huge question to think about. Russia and China might not be on the actual battlefield, but in this new kind of warfare, could their presence in the shadows be the one thing that actually decides who wins?